Welcome to fabulous Skeg Vegas. Believe it or not, I've wanted to photograph this sign for quite some time, but now I'm here, I've encountered a problem, and it's a problem I'm sure you'll have encountered visiting photography locations as well. How do I actually get an interesting photograph of this thing? I could take my photograph from here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or even here. When we as photographers are faced with a new location, I think we can be in danger of one of the biggest mistakes any photographer can make, and that is overthinking things. I truly believe that to make an interesting photograph, all you need are two things. Well, three if you count your camera. Firstly, something to photograph, tick, and secondly, an idea. So, we've ticked that first box, we've got something to photograph. Now the danger is that we throw absolutely every composition technique that we know at this photograph to try and make this thing stand out, where all we really need is that idea. Let me explain. So from a traditional composition perspective, you could say that this one works quite well. I've got the strong lead of the road going down the left-hand side, which is leading your eye in through that diagonal to the sign itself. And you'll see that I've carefully placed the sign on the right-hand third, so it leads your eye in towards the centre of the picture. I've also gone down to a slightly lower level, so the sign stands proud of the horizon line and is isolated against the negative space of the sky beyond. But I personally think that this photograph has some issues, big issues. Firstly, we've got this large area of negative space top left in the frame. Now you could say that that's balancing the composition, but I think it's actually doing the opposite, because the thing that's leading your eye, and it's leading it to that side, is the strong leading line of the road going in on that diagonal. And because it's not actually leading towards the sign itself, it's sort of taking you off into the distance, we're almost splitting the photograph in two, with the left-hand half being the road and a lot of negative space, and all the action with the sign, our main subject, all happening on this right-hand side. I think one of the strengths of that previous composition was the fact that the sign stood out against the blue sky. So why not try getting rid of all the other stuff in the frame and just concentrate on what it is that we want people to look at? Excuse me whilst I come round behind you and fiddle around. So we could try something along the lines of this. Bear with me, I'll try not to make you feel too seasick. I'm just going to zoom in a touch. Maybe move the camera up and around a bit. Yeah, something like that. We've now isolated the sign against the sky. It certainly stands out, and we're looking at exactly what we want to be looking at. No, sorry, we're just coming up against more issues again. Firstly, we're falling into the trap of throwing the rule of thirds at this photograph, where I don't necessarily think it needs it. Yes, the sign's on the left and it's coming across to the right, but I think that because we're dealing with a very simple scene in negative space, that extra bit of blue on the right-hand side is just off-balancing the frame. Yes, I suppose we could move the frame across so the sign appears more centrally, but at the end of the day, it's just a photograph of a sign. It's not really that interesting, even though it's quite an interesting sign. Does that make sense? So why don't we try out a composition from this other side of the sign? The sign is isolated against the sky, but yet we're still providing a bit of context of the landscape that it's in, whilst keeping the frame nice and simple. It might even work as a square crop. But hang on a minute, there's another problem here, and it's a big problem. The light's coming in from the other side, so this side of the sign's in darkness. And for that matter, I'm in darkness as well. You probably can't even see me. I'm here, by the way. We're starting to see the problem of having something to photograph, but not really having an idea of how we want to photograph it. When I first found out about this sign, instead of jumping in the car and rushing down the 2.5-hour journey to park in a boring lay-by next to a field, I decided to come up with my idea first. I asked myself, when people look at my photograph that I take of this sign, what do I actually want them to see? I decided that I wanted to show off the irony of this sign. The fact that it's big, glamorous, in your face, reminding us of one of the most vibrant cities in the world, yet it's located in the middle of some fields on the outskirts of a run-down Lincolnshire seaside town in the winter. So this is the composition that I've settled on. I suppose I'm twinning that visual aesthetic with a bit of a documentary theme, trying to say something about this sign rather than just photographing it as a visual object. As far as the composition goes, instead of using that strong lead of the road, I've utilised the more subtle leads of the edge of the grass, the building on the right-hand side, and the track that's leading you up towards the road. All of these things have the effect of leading your eye towards the middle, and then of course we have the vibrant bright sign on the left-hand side of the picture, which then bounces your eye back around. Yes, I've still got quite a bit of negative space, especially on the right-hand side of the photograph, but I think the bit of sky with the detail in it adds this feeling of optimism of what might be beyond this otherwise quite drab scene, apart from the sign of course. And then the area of gravelly tarmacy stuff is punctuated by the puddles, which not only act as a bit of foreground interest, they also act as these visual stepping stones taking you through the composition. I've also gone with a 4:3 crop rather than the standard 3:2 crop that I would get from my full frame camera. What this has the effect of doing is it cuts all the stuff out that's superfluous to requirement at either side of the photograph, and also helps to channel your eye more centrally as you follow those subtle leading lines and the visual stepping stones of the puddles. I also think it gives it a bit of a medium format documentary style look as well, which ties in with the idea that I was going for. I've also made a few edits. I've darkened the grass because that started to take over a little bit. I've increased the brightness and the vibrancy of the sign because at the end of the day, that's my subject. I want it to stand out. But I've also brightened the wall in the background as well, just to act as a bit more of a buffer so your eye's not disappearing off into deep shadow. And I've also taken a few of the extra signs out, which I didn't think added to the photograph. I know a lot of you may jump into the comments and say that's sacrilege, Tom, how dare you take something out of a picture. But for me, I'm a conceptual photographer first and foremost, and if the things that are there and I can't avoid when I'm out in the field taking the photographs are distracting, then I have no qualms about taking them out. If you want to know exactly how I went about editing this photograph, then make sure that you subscribe to my channel, because in a future video I intend to go through each and every step. I could have spent a whole day just trying out different angles on this sign, throwing various different composition techniques at it, hoping for the best. Well, I suppose I've done that anyway because I've been filming this video. But coming with an idea in mind, even if I didn't really know what I was going to be faced with when I got here, just made my decision making on which photograph that I actually wanted to get so much more easy.